Welcome to Vedic Counselor, where ancient Vedic wisdom meets modern scientific insight.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really deep and philosophical perspective on mental health, and we're pulling from the ancient system of Vedic Jyotish to do it. We're going to explore how this system tries to map out our emotional tendencies, especially those linked to depression, using the language of planets and, well, cosmic patterns. Okay, before we get into any of this, I have to make something absolutely crystal clear. This explainer is for educational and cultural understanding. That's it. It is not in any way medical advice. If you or anyone you know is going through a hard time, please seek immediate help from a qualified medical professional.
So the entire philosophy we're exploring today really comes down to this one powerful idea. According to the source text, the planets in a birth chart are seen as indicating tendencies, right? Inclinations. You could call them karmic paths of least resistance. But, and this is the key, they never ever take away your free will. They incline. They do not compel.
All right, so here's our roadmap. We'll touch on the huge role of the moon, then look at the so-called planets of affliction and see how they can combine into these karmic patterns. We'll also get into the most acute indicators before we wrap it all up with how this system actually views destiny and free will. Okay, to really get this perspective on depression, we have to start with the moon. In Vedic Jyotish, pretty much everything about our inner world, our feelings, our emotions, our sense of peace, it all begins with this one celestial body. You see, the moon, or Chandra as it's called, isn't just some rock orbiting the Earth. In this system, it's considered the main karaka, which just means significator for the mind itself, or manas. The state of the moon in a birth chart is said to be a direct mirror of our emotional stability, how well we sleep, and our overall sense of inner calm. So a strong moon suggests a resilient mind. A weakened one, well, that suggests emotional vulnerability. So if the moon represents the light of our mind, the next logical question is, what can dim that light? And that brings us to the planets of affliction. These are the forces that are said to bring us life's tougher lessons and challenges. The system basically splits planets into two camps. On one side, you have the benefics, like Jupiter and Venus, which are all about expansion, joy, wisdom. And then you have the malefics, like Saturn and the lunar nodes Rahu and Ketu. And it's how these malefic planets interact with that very sensitive moon that really forms the basis of what we're talking about today. And these difficulties aren't just one size fits all. No way. Each planet is said to bring a very specific flavor of trouble. Saturn, for example, gives this heavy, melancholic, burdensome feeling. Rahu brings this intense, almost obsessive anxiety and phobias. Ketu is more about a sense of emotional numbness, like an existential emptiness. And Mars? Well, Mars can represent anger that gets bottled up and turns inward. But here's the thing. These influences don't just exist in a vacuum. When they line up in very specific ways, they form what are called yogas, which are basically named karmic patterns. Think of a yoga like a cosmic recipe. Seriously, you take one part moon, you add one part Saturn, you put them in a specific spot in the chart, and bam, you get a predictable emotional outcome. It's kind of like a formula that takes these individual planetary energies and combines them into something more complex, something unified. And the source material names a few key yogas that are really relevant here. For example, when the moon and Saturn get together, it forms Vish Yoga, which literally means poison yoga, and that points to this deep, chronic, emotional heaviness. When the moon is with Rahu or Ketu, that's called Grahan Yoga, or Eclipse Yoga, which is a perfect description for a mind that feels totally eclipsed by anxiety. And if the moon is all by itself, that's Chemdrum Yoga, which points to a really profound sense of loneliness. And this brings us to what's probably the most sensitive part of this whole explainer. Beyond just general sadness or anxiety, the system also talks about combinations that are thought to indicate a weakening of the fundamental will to live. So the framework of this system really forces us to ask a critical question. What happens when the problem goes even deeper than just the emotional mind? What happens when it touches the very source of our vitality, our optimism? And this is where things get really interesting, because the focus actually shifts away from the moon and onto another planet, Jupiter. In Vedic Jyotish, Jupiter, or Guru, isn't just about wisdom. It's the karaka for jiva, which you can translate as the life force itself. It's the planet of hope, optimism. It's our inner guidance system. According to the source, the most severe tendencies aren't seen as just one single thing, but more like a cascade, a domino effect. It starts with a really afflicted Jupiter, which weakens that life force.
Then, you pile on top of that a combination like the moon with both Rahu and Saturn, which creates this intense mental torment. Add in some other factors, and you get a picture of a personality structure that's really struggling to handle the pressure.
Which, brings us full circle, right back to that huge philosophical point we started with. If a chart can point to such deep challenges, what does that say about free will, about our power to change?
The source text makes a pretty remarkable claim. It actually says that awareness itself is half the remedy. Just the act of understanding these karmic patterns, of shining a light on these subconscious tendencies, that is considered the most powerful first step you can take toward transforming them.
And this is so important. This system is not fatalistic. It's not about doom and gloom. It also points out protective factors. Even in a chart that has some really tough combinations, a strong and well-placed sun, which represents our vitality, or a resilient Jupiter, our hope, can act like powerful shields, giving us inherent strength and resilience.
And this really is the ultimate takeaway. The perspective here is that a birth chart is a complete map. It doesn't just show you where the potential pitfalls are. Woven into that very same map is the path toward healing and overcoming them. The problem and the solution are seen as two parts of the exact same whole.
And so we're left with this final thought to chew on. This ancient perspective suggests that our greatest challenges and our greatest strengths are often intimately linked. They're just two sides of the same cosmic coin. If a pattern points to a struggle, maybe, just maybe, it's also pointing to where our greatest potential for growth and transcendence truly lies.
If you found this video helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel Vedic Counselor. For personal astrology consultation, horoscope analysis, or Vastu consultation, you can contact us on WhatsApp 919219539215 or visit our website www.vediccounselor.com. Thank you for watching.